Good morning.
Good morning. How you guys doing?
Good. How are you doing?
Doing all right. I heard. I was thinking of the generational difference between me and Matt, because he was talking about a Broccoli song by Lil Yachty, I believe.
Yes. Yeah.
I am familiar with Lil Yachty.
Okay.
Because he does the dance onto the stage that everybody steals from. Correct.
Yes. The
Yeah.
gritty.
The gritty?
Yeah. Does he do that?
That thing, obviously.
I wouldn't. Well, one of your favorite football players is very well known for doing it, so you would know the gritty.
Yeah, I didn't even know that those were the same dances. That's how out of tune I am. But when you were talking about broccoli, I was thinking of Dana Carvey from the 90s, chopping broccoli.
Oh, yes, I do know.
So,
Me too,
I
BC.
am aware.
Great
of
minds.
That. I am aware of that. No, it's he's the songbird of our generation, Lil Yachty. Him and Adele.
Yeah, I've seen him do interviews. He's actually kind of a funny guy.
He's actually
Yachty,
really cool. Yeah. No, he's one of the good ones.
Yesterday, Nebraska had to dust off the envelope or the book that says the class of 2026 with Jace Reynolds from right here at Elkhorn North. Plays in a really good high school football program. Sam Stanley is a really good coach. They have high football IQ. When I look at him, and I've seen Jace play for a couple of years, and he's an incredible athlete, not just on the football field. He's gotten a little bit bigger. He's like 6'3", 200. I know Shafe talked to him, but doesn't, like, if you look at like a blueprint for what they think Jace Reynolds could do, haven't they had like the Luke Giffords, the Christian Jones, the Gage Stengers, the Nick Henriches? Doesn't he kind of remind you of those type of in-state linebackers that have that similar size?
Yeah, absolutely. Linebacker, DB hybrid, sort of fits into that. You can be positionless model, at least arriving to campus. And I just think it's a good fit. They saw him, at camp last June up close, and were really impressed with his traits. And that's the way they want to operate is see those guys in a camp setting. What can you do in front of us as we put you through the different paces? And he impressed. And one of three guys in this class in state who had offers. So, when you're not giving out a lot of offers in state, it says a lot about what they think about his potential and exactly how they could use him or the versatility which he would bring. And I know he's excited about John Butler's defense, and it seems like he's had a good connection with him too, as they've kind of talked about things. So a cool deal for him. He's probably under the radar nationally some. Like I know we just rated him the other day, gave him a fresh rating. But I tend to trust this staff when they make an in-state offer that they feel really good about how that can play out.
Matt Rule was hired in part, Brian, because of his pedigree when it comes to developing players, right? It's some of the best things he did at Temple and at Baylor. And I'm looking at this current Nebraska Cornhusker roster, and it's really talented, but there are a lot of guys this season who are filling big roles who have to take that jump in order for them to, kind of have that year 3 leap, right? So from your perspective, do you think that, like, maybe it's just there are too many guys on this roster that have to take big steps in order for this team to accomplish a lot? Or do you kind of defer to trusting Matt Rule because player development is what he specialized in as he's been a coach in college football?
I mean, it's definitely a prove-it year for a lot of guys, but I think every school around the country is sort of dealing with that in the transfer portal era where you get these new faces in your lineup, and so you don't know exactly how it's going to work this time of year. You're hopeful, but it does kind of, in a way, level the playing field where even programs that had good years last year or were in the playoffs, they're like, okay, now we have these new pieces and we need them to make a jump just like Nebraska needs some of these guys. So I think just in the situation we're in, every year is so different now. And that I guess that adds an excitement to it because these guys should all see opportunity. Like if I'm a guy on the defensive line and I've heard for the last 4 months about how do you replace Ty and Nash and all this stuff, I'm pretty fired up to go show you know what, I came here on scholarship for a reason. They picked me for these various attributes that I have, and I'm about to show out. And so hopefully you have some guys who understand this is their moment. They don't shrink from it. Your question's fair though, Matt, because it's there is the guys that, especially on that D line, that have to come along well. There's guys we wonder about on O line. It sounds like Elijah Pritchett had a good spring for the most part, making progressions, but he's going to have to be stout. And so yeah, they have to answer the bell. But I do like how certain new guys can help push it along. Like I'm excited, like at the jack spot. I think they can be really good there with like Willis McGahee, but also like Desan McCullough, what he adds to that. And I think Marquise Watson Trent is really good for like that second level, just with his experience. But I do go back to the D line over and over again, and it's like, all right, let's see what you got, guys, with Van Pop and Keona and those guys. But I think they're eager to show that, hey, this isn't going to be a step back. And the one thing I'll add is, it is tough to replace some of the guys they lost up front, but Nash was not 100% for much of last year. And so, like he battled through that season and maybe didn't even have quite the production he did the year before. And so that bar that we set pretty high in these conversations, I think it can be more reachable sometimes than we think, while also acknowledging Ty Robinson was really, really good last season.
Let's one thing I enjoy of the different angles you take is you have your weekend 5, and you rank the 5 Husker away challenges in 2025. You may have this in the hopper, but sticking with the defensive side of the ball, if you had to do your weekend 5 and the top 5 players on this current roster, would Sierra Wright make it inside of your top 5? Not the most important, but just top 5 players on this roster.
Yeah. He was a guy who you could tell was walking tall this spring. He's been a good leader. He just has that sort of swag about him, I think, after how he played last season. And we can, which I do talk a lot about the D line, but if you have corners that can lock down, as Mike Riley once said, who I realized yesterday again is on the college football playoff committee. I forgot completely about that. But as Mike Riley once said, corners are gold. And that's very true. Like if you have those guys who it's like, okay, they can take someone out of the equation or completely, kind of lock down one side of the field, you can do so much on the defensive side. So if Sierra can take one more step from last season, and I just thought he was very competitive, even on some catches that were had on him, he was right there. And so I just thought he had a tenacity. I don't know if it's because he wears that number 15. There's a little bit that reminds me of Alfonso Denard and sort of just like his pluckiness out there. And he's got a great personality that I think other guys feed off. So he would be in my top 5. And now the question is, who's on that other side? There's some good options. Yeah. As Matt Rule said, they have 6 corners they thought could potentially start at the end of spring. I think Andrew Marshall's interesting. I think Amari Sanders is interesting. There's some other names in that mix. So they should be able to figure it out because they still have the bodies. The portal did not hit them as hard in that back end, as I think we might have guessed like a month or so ago.
Hey, did you hear much about Bly Hill through spring?
Yeah, I heard a little bit about him, and I think I know when Addison Williams got here and he did his interview with the media, one of the first things he talked about was just like the length all over the secondary that he really liked. And your mind immediately goes to Bly, and you remind yourself like he was the starter at the end of last spring before that unfortunate injury in the spring game. And so he is definitely someone, I think, as you go through the summer and fall camp that you should mention along with the guys I previously said as cornerback options. And that's why I'm confident in that back end and what they can be. They got to go prove it. There's going to be somebody who's out there for his first serious snaps as a Husker corner. So he's going to have to get it done, but they have enough guys where you'd like to think that competition should push someone to be pretty stout on that side opposite Sierra.
Troy Dannon being named to the college football playoff committee, cool honor, or that we're going to be like, oh, good for him, or do you think this is an actual needle mover for the future of the athletic department in any
I don't
sort
think
of
it's
way?
I don't think it's a needle mover, but I think in that fraternity, anytime you can be on committees of matter
Mm-hmm.
and put yourself as one of the main voices, that's important for your athletic department. Maybe for other issues, right?
Yeah.
Or that behind the scenes where it's like that you have at Nebraska one of the ADs who's not just respected in the region but nationally, and so when there are certain big issues, you have a voice at the table that's really well respected. And so you kind of feel confident in just Dannon's place, like within that network, when you see him in a committee like that. Now, yesterday, if you had asked me to take a quiz and name off 4 to 5 of the 13 people on the committee, I would have failed that miserably.
Sure.
So, like, does some guy in Boise, Idaho care about it? No. But, I do think for that reason, and that it's important. I also think Gary, I was listening to you guys last hour, and he made a good point about how you can bring back some of that intel that you get from those meetings, with the committee about this is sort of the separating points of this team from that team, and that could be meaningful as well.
Hey, I want to circle back to recruiting because, of course, Trey Taylor and, I saw the picture shared that Trey Taylor got his first offer was from Maryland when he was in 7th grade. And we now know his connection to Bryce Underwood and all of that kind of stuff. And it's been kind of interesting getting to know this young man and what he can bring. 2 questions here. Have you heard of any even inkling that he may be considering or somebody would present reclassifying to move up a year?
Ooh.
And then the other part is he's already peer recruiting. How come we don't hear like Dayton Raiola peer recruiting?
I don't know enough about the reclassification thing to speak on it yet, but I don't count out anything in this day and age. So, the thing about Trey is he's been in this recruiting game so long. So, I mean, if there were like a 16-year-old who was probably ready to move on or get going at the next level, it's probably him because he has been recruited since he was 12 or 13. He did get his first offer in the 7th grade, and that's why his decision did not come early. I know there's people who are skeptical in this day and age, like, yeah, I'll believe it when I see it when he signs, but his family put in a lot of research, before making that decision. So I'm pretty hopeful that one will stand tall for Nebraska. As far as Dayton, I don't know. Some guys I think do peer recruit better than we know. Like, some guys are more on social media with it. And so I don't know if like behind the scenes, like when like Dayton is and he's been in Lincoln, a few times, that's an opportunity where I think that's probably the biggest moment for those QBs to have an influence when they actually are at events in town where all the facilities are around them and some 4-star is on campus with them. And you can kind of picture like, this is where we can do it, man. This like right here in this setting, me and you, and that's a big deal. And so I do think Dayton has done some of that. And some guys are just going to be more about it on X and all that. And I don't know how big a deal that is. Like, does that matter or not? I don't know with the X stuff. But it's good that Trey wants to be that. And obviously we've seen with Dylan how big a deal that is for a quarterback, the face of that class, can draw other people in. I mean, he's done. We didn't get that with Dylan that December when he committed to Nebraska because there wasn't enough time. But since then, we've seen with the portal guys like Dane Key and Isaiah Hunter, even Jamal Banks last year, he had such a big influence and was one of the first guys to reach out to him. And that meant a lot to those wide receivers. So I don't just push that to the side, that peer recruiting thing, especially with QBs and receivers. I think it matters a lot. And that's why it also matters that this offense hums a little bit in 25 for those other guys who aren't here yet. because it sort of builds in the mind of recruits like, hey, Nebraska's offense is on the climb. They've got their quarterback sort of set up in a row for the next few years. This thing can take off. So it can all come together if that would happen.
Brian, in this day and age, we see a lot of college or high school recruits rather take the most amount of money and play right away, but and try and go to a place where they can get on the field as quickly as possible. But we saw in Texas with Arch Manning, who's set to be, the top quarterback in this class, whether it be in 2026 or 2027 for the NFL draft. We've seen him take a different approach, right? And stay in Texas, not transfer, wait for his turn, then go and play quarterback. Do you think that his success could be influential in college football? And do you think it could benefit a team like Nebraska, who has been able to stack some pretty high quality quarterback recruits?
Yeah, I'm hopeful more guys will say, hey, if it didn't just happen the first year, I can still have success in developing this program.
Mm-hmm.
And the more success stories that we have, whether it's Arch Manning or anybody, where they stuck with the program and they took off in years 2 or 3 or 4, I think that's going to be good for other guys to see. So that's a good example. And I think Nebraska's quarterback situation, like Trey Taylor, he looks at it like Dylan Raiola might not even be a factor by the time I get there.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's useful to him probably. But I think Nebraska did very good sort of working through that window of the early Raiola years. We're still in them, but in sort of stacking up their quarterback room, because a year ago there was that question that was always asked, like, well, who are you going to convince to come, be the quarterback at Nebraska or be in that competition when Dylan seems like he has this job for at least 3
Mm-hmm.
years. And in the meantime, of course, it helps that his brother's one of the guys, but they were able to sort of build their depth. The Latif to sign him, and then Marcos to come in and add to that room. And now Trey Taylor, you kind of get on the other side of Dylan Raiola and you can see the future. So I think it's good that Nebraska kind of got through that phase and they got through it pretty well, actually.
Hey, when do you think, and I think we got to see the 2 newest quarterbacks for the first time in the Husker games, and we kind of wanted more. They both have big boy arms in Davila and Latif. But where do you think it flipped? And I know the obvious answer is Dylan committing, but 2 years ago, Nebraska went to Minnesota, and Sims, Harburg, and Purdy were their 3 scholarship quarterbacks. They're going to go to Arrowhead this year, and they're going to have 3 4-stars. Some might even have had Dylan as a 5-star, Latif, Davila, and Raiola. Where do you think in a span of 2 years, what do you think is the biggest thing on how the overall quarterback room and recruiting changed?
I mean, it's hard to look beyond Dylan to answer that question, but I also think right now Dana Holgorsen has that sort of name that is attractive to offensive players, and I think he's pretty good too when recruits are in town about getting across, like, you want an opportunity, we're going to push you, you can have it here. I always think of the Dane Key line about how Holgorsen challenged him, like, if you want to, if you want it small, more or less, go back to Kentucky. If you want to come and really go at it, come here to Nebraska. Mm-hmm. So I think there's some of that in him and some on this staff that sell guys well. But yeah, I think I think Ryle is where it really starts to that answer. It was just like that. I'll never forget that. It was like a Monday night in December, and you start to see on social media Ryle is flipping.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest recruiting story since I've been on this beat. I mean, that was not just a big, like, locally everybody's talking about it. That was like a national story for the next day or so. And so everybody who is, whether you're like a 24, 25, 27, 28 recruit who's like wants to be something in college football, they saw that, and it was a pivotal moment. And Ryle still brings that attention, and if he has a really good year, it's going to help Nebraska further with that. But he's one of those names. Even the stuff that's out there when he's like compared to mini Mahomes and stuff like that, it might seem like bad press or whatever to some people, or that people are taking shots at him. But other kids see that and they're like, okay, that's a spot where stuff's happening, and so I think that's pretty useful.
We could play. I think we have to add him to the list of the what if for Jeff Sims. What if Jeff Sims was manageable in 2023? How much different the quarterback position in Nebraska would be, whether it be the OC, the position coach, Dylan coming, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you might not have that. What we have, I mean, sometimes things don't go a little sideways on you, and it can end up working to your benefit. It's that way in life and in football, where it didn't feel good in the moment, but there's certain dominoes that fall because of it, and so it's one of those butterfly effect type things.
Yeah.
But him actually struggling sort of did open up doors to maybe be in the situation Nebraska's in now. And I don't want to act like they got it all solved at QB. Dylan's got to go out and he's got to be good. I mean, he's got to be that elite quarterback this year. There's a lot of pressure on him to do that. I just think, and you name the three quarterbacks that were on the trip like a year ago, and now you think about the room and the guys who are committed, and you feel a lot better about it. And you also think like, they actually, as I said, got through that window of the early Raiola years where they were able to stack up potential guys to be next in line after him. And that was definitely a question we talked about on shows like this, a year ago, like who wants to be a part of that, and they've managed to get through it. And so I think that's a big deal.
Yeah. BC, as always, we appreciate it. Have a great week.
Yeah, thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you, Brian.
Great stuff.